When we're dealing with topics that are unfamiliar to us, it can be extra hard to contextualize numbers, especially when those numbers are really big. So here's an example. The number of people without a family doctor in the province, British Columbia, has grown from about 340,000 in 2003 to 908,000 in 2017 and is expected to be higher this year. Now, I don't know about you, but I have a lot of trouble picturing what 908,000 people is like. That's very tricky for me. I don't have a good grounding for that. It's not as easy as picturing 10 people or 100. And I also don't know how extraordinary this is. How many people in British Columbia normally are without a family doctor? Is this really a departure from what's typical? I don't know because I don't know what those numbers are ordinarily. And I also don't know what percent this is of the whole population. So for me to understand this, I might like to know, well, how many people are actually in the province so I could understand about what proportion of them are affected. Here's another example. A record volume of 354,500 tons of agricultural products was carried on vessels leaving Ukrainian ports on Monday as part of the agreement. Now, I really do not know how many tons of agricultural products are normally leaving ports. I don't know what a big number is like. I know that 354,500 sounds like a big number. It's certainly bigger than numbers I normally think about. But how much bigger than normal is that for agricultural trade? I really don't know here. So what we've come up against is that it can be challenging to think about really big numbers, especially when they occur in contexts that are just unfamiliar to us. And, I don't want to just look at news and go, wow, that's a big number, so it must be important. Of course, that's not always true. Sometimes a number could be big, but maybe it's not very newsworthy. What if 354,500 tons was actually quite normal? I wouldn't really be able to know. So it's important to distinguish that big isn't the same as newsworthy. Newsworthy means that something is, out of the ordinary, or if it is ordinary, that we're looking at it through new eyes somehow. And so we really do need to use context, like benchmarks for comparison, to understand what's being reported, particularly when numbers are on a scale that we're just not used to thinking about and about topics that occur on scales that are unfamiliar to us. At the other end of the spectrum, we have really small numbers. Now, rare occurrences can happen a lot in a big world, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. Here's an example. Each year in the United States, about 1 in 100 pregnancies result in severe maternal health complications. And this comes from CDC annual reporting. And so the real number is actually a little bit higher. It's between 1 in 100 and 1 in 200, but I'm rounding it to 1 in 100 for simplicity. And a severe maternal health complication is defined as an event that was recorded at a hospital where the person giving birth needed major intervention in order to, avoid impairment or injury or death. And just a note that this statistic, we have maternal health complications is being measured here, and so the statistic might not be adequately capturing data about transgender parents in the United States. So if we unpack this a little bit further, we start with 1 in 100 pregnancies in the US poses a serious maternal health risk. And there were more than 3.6 million births in 2021 in the United States. This actually comes out to there being more than 50,000 women with severe pregnancy complications in a year. And these numbers, this calculation, it is from, I think, like 2014 or 2015, but as far as I can tell, it is pretty consistent. There's no reason to think it's gone down. So we have an estimate that actually we're seeing, this considerable number of people who have a severe complication during pregnancy. So it's both true that there's 1 in 100 pregnancies, which sounds kind of rare, that have a serious risk to the mother, but that's also about 50,000 Americans. So two ways of looking at it, something that's somewhat rare, but with a lot of people having a lot of births, that can actually be a substantial number of events. So to summarize, just because a number sounds big, it doesn't mean it's newsworthy. We need context, and the bigger the number, the more likely we are to just not have an internal benchmark about it and to need some extra cues that help us put it in context. On the other hand, just because a number sounds small, that doesn't mean it can't have a big effect. If something is relatively rare, but it can happen to a lot of people, if there's a lot of events in a big world with a lot of time, that can still add up to a lot of occurrences that can affect a lot of people.